Hello, and welcome to this Arts Month Community Conversation. I'm Jonathan Toman with the Cultural Office of the Pikes Peak region. And tonight we're excited to bring you Yes and, the current creativity and dreams of the Springs theatrical community. This is the fourth of 8 community conversations that will take place throughout the month of October, and the second and final within Theater and Film Week of Arts Month. These community conversations, curated by local artists and arts leaders, will showcase a variety of timely and relevant topics within the various arts sectors of the Pikes Peak region. Tonight, as I mentioned, that topic is Yes and, the current creativity and dreams of the Springs theatrical community. We've had stellar moderators and panelists so far for each of these community conversations, and tonight is no different. Joining me now is Scott Levy, the producing artistic director for the Fine Arts Center Theater Company at the Colorado Springs Fine Arts Center at Colorado College. That's a lot of ats, but welcome, Scott.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Scott Levy is an award-winning and acclaimed artistic director, producer, director, actor, and educator of theater. He is starting his 10th season as the producing artistic director of the Colorado Springs Fine Arts Center Theater Company at Colorado College. Scott will introduce the four panelists that he assembled shortly. I should note that these 5 will have complete artistic control of the conversation this evening. That said, I will get out of the way and let Scott take us away.
Thanks, Jonathan, and thanks to Copper, and thanks to all of you who are tuning in, whether live or after the fact for this conversation. As Jonathan noted, I have started my 10th season as the producing artistic director of the Fine Arts Center. I never imagined this would be how a 10th season would look, but here we are, and we are all in the same boat. I think no matter the size of the organization and no matter the geographic location of the organization, what a time to be in. Let's bring the panelists in. These are my friends and my colleagues and just a small swath of the amazingly large leadership of the theatrical community that we have here in Colorado Springs and in the Pikes Peak region. First up, please welcome Jonathan Andujar. Jonathan has been writing, acting, directing, and producing theater in Colorado Springs since 2013. He graduated from Adams State University with a degree in theater and creative writing. Jonathan has adapted literary works for the stage, written shorts for various nonprofits in Colorado Springs, and adapted the works of H.P. Lovecraft in Theater Dart's production of excerpts from Miskatonic University, An Evening with H.P. Lovecraft, written shorts for the Manitou Springs Heritage Center's Haunted History of Old Manitou Walking Tours, dabbled in copywriting with the Cultural Office of the Pikes Peak region and Theater to Art, and is also part of the writing team for Of Spacious Skies, the audio play series that we were currently creating at the Fine Arts Center. And Jonathan is also currently a theater Spanish teacher at the Colorado Springs School and has been the president of Theater Dart since 2019. Thanks for joining me, Jonathan.
Hello, Scott. Thank you for having me. I am super excited to be here.
I'm super excited for you to be here at the end of the, well, I was going to say the end of the work week, but it's like work week for like people with normal jobs, right? I mean, those of us in the theater, we're working all the time.
Yep.
And we'll get into that in a little bit. Next up, let's have Matt Radcliffe join the party. Matt is a marketing strategist, an award-winning graphic designer, and Henry-nominated theater professional. In earlier days, he became an Eagle Scout and served in the Army, earning a Bronze Star Medal for meritorious service. Thank you for your service. Since departing the Army, Matt has earned an associate's degree in multimedia graphic design from Pikes Peak Community College and a bachelor's of science in business administration from UCCS. And Matt is president currently of Springs Ensemble Theater, showing the logo with pride both on his shirt and in the banner behind him. And over the past 8 years, Matt has produced, directed, acted, and or designed for Springs Ensemble Theater and just about every other theater company in Colorado Springs. How are you this evening, my friend?
I'm doing well, Scott, especially now that I get to see you guys.
And, aren't you sweet? Thank you so much. And now let's bring in Jim Jackson. Mr. Jackson.
Hello, Scott. How are you?
I'm good. Jim Jackson, I mean, I would think that everybody knows who Jim Jackson is, but if not, Jim Jackson has worked in professional theater and circus for over 45 years. I don't know how it's possible. He's only 32. As a clown, actor, director, teacher, and writer. Jim is currently the executive director of the Millabo Art Theater here in Colorado Springs, company dedicated to the production of new performance, which he co-founded with his wife, Birgitta Dupree, in 2002. And your bio just goes on and on. So I'm going to leave.
Just skip that part, really.
I'm gonna skip all of the rest of it. And maybe I should say I'm sad or thankful that you didn't wear a red nose this evening.
I have it handy, really. And if if the conversation degenerates, I'll put it on.
Great. Now we did have scheduled another panelist, and Caitlin Lowans, who's in her third season as artistic director at Theatreworks, but she is having some significant technical issues, or we don't know. So she's trying to work it out, and hopefully she'll be able to join us in just a little while. But for the moment, it's just the four of us. Okay, gentlemen? So I really wanted to start with talking a little bit about each of the organizations that you are here representing, that you've been a part of. And if you could just think about whether Jim has been part of the Millabo because he founded it with Birgitta, so he's been with it from the beginning. But even if you haven't, if you could just point to some hallmarks that point to how your organization has existed in the past, and what are some of the things that you think are like stars of light that really make your company so imperative to the theatrical scene here in the Springs? Anyone want to tackle that first?
Sure. I mean, I'll start it out. So I work with Theater Art, and like Scott mentioned, I have recently taken over the reins in the last year or so. And with Theater Art, what originally drew me to the organization when it was under the tutelage of Brian Mann and company was that they were really fearless in tackling a lot of productions that wouldn't otherwise be seen in town. My first production with Theater Art was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where I got to play Chief Bromden, and that was an incredible experience for me in seeing that that company was able to really take on such monumental works. And since then, they have done a lot of They have done a lot of experimental things, such as devised performances with an adaptation of The Tempest. They have done Marat Sade downtown, which was incredible. Most recently, in the last few years or so, they've done Angels in America Part 1 and 2, which Matt was gracious enough to be a part of, and people still talk about that production. Also, Theater Art, under the direction of Kayla Rockmore, did Short Eyes, which was written by Miguel Piñero, a Puerto Rican playwright, and he was the first Puerto Rican playwright to win a Tony in theater in general. And so just that fearlessness is something that has always attracted me to Theater Art. And so since taking over, we've done a lot of really experimental things, just trying to find our footing and our niche in the community. And with that, we've done all sorts of stuff, from like puppet shows in the Zodiac, which unfortunately COVID claimed that venue, and that was an absolute riot. We took on the Manitou Springs Ghost Tours these last couple years, and unfortunately, I do have to say that even though we have completely sold out all of our performances, a notice was set out after the most recent press conference with Governor Polis that we will be postponing further shows, just out of an abundance of caution to our performers and our patrons. And as the head of an organization, it is just absolutely imperative to listen to the voice and the care of the actors, first and foremost. Furthermore, we've got a lot of really exciting projects lined up.
Well, let's save that for a little later, Jonathan. Although let's not take
I will.
out of the bag yet.
Can I mention just one more thing that it
Yes,
doesn't,
sure,
it doesn't
please.
do that? We had done a production of Puerto Rican Nocturne, which was also claimed by COVID, written by Jonathan Marcantoni, directed by A.B. Lugo, and that really was part of the fearlessness of theater art in terms of telling stories by playwrights and directors that are new to the scene, and that's something that we like to foster is new talent in Colorado Springs theater.
Yeah, that's super. I mean, what a wide breadth of different kinds of work that Theater d'Art has been able to create and will continue to create over the last 2 decades. Really, that's fabulous. Matt or Jim, tell us a little bit about the history of your organizations.
Oh, Matt, please go ahead. Really, I'm trying to remember, and it takes me a while. So.
So SET, or Springs Ensemble Theater, is akin to Theater d'Art. We actually started right around the same amount at the same time. This is SET's 11th year of producing theater. And in the past, our tagline has been intimate live theater, and one of the things we really thought was interesting about our space was we had a black box, or have, I mean, we still have the space, that's 25 feet by 26 feet across, and that houses the actors, the audience, and everyone that's involved with the production. So, in those 11 years, we put on over 40 shows. We've had thousands of individual audience experiences. One of the things that SET has been kind of a founding principle of us is that we're an all-volunteer company, and because of that, what we're see ourselves as in a lot of ways is like an incubator for theater talent. It's a great place for people who are just getting started in the profession. It's for people that are maybe in between major projects, and it's a good way for us to show some more kind of hard-hitting pieces that wouldn't necessarily hit some of the bigger stages. We implemented some women's Shakespeare stuff. Last Christmas, we did an all-female version of Julius Caesar, and a gender-reversed version of Julius Caesar, excuse me. And a few years ago, we did an all-female Titus Andronicus. That's something that we're hoping to continue to do. We also just very recently, I don't know if we're going to talk about this later, or but when COVID hit, we were mid-season.
Let's talk about the present stuff after we get through the history. And I love that that so far both Jonathan and Matt, I mean, you're so excited about talking about what you've been up to. Like, I love it. It's just ready. It's foaming out. But if we hold on to it, then we'll be sure to fill the hour. Mr. Jackson, tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, we are here to fill the hour, let me tell you. And I'm going to start back because it's our 19th season for the Millabo Art Theater. So I'll just start at season 1 and just briefly recap each season as we go along. So actually, we started as a Manitou Art Theater back in 2002, and we were there for 7 years, and then moved to a venue. It was actually 2 garages that we created a 85-seat theater space out of on Pecan Street. And we were there for 3 or 4 years. And then we moved to a new venue on South Tejon Street in the Ivywild neighborhood. And that's where we currently are. We have a nice 105-seat venue there, which since March has become like the world's most expensive storage space and closet. But that's the way it is. That's the timing of it. It's a theater that my wife and I founded in order to foster new work. Originally, we started as a children's theater, and we had a lot of shows which we created in-house, as well as touring shows come in for children. And then we expanded to an adult series as well. So last season, we mixed it up a bit. Actually, starting the season before, we had a wonderful play called The Tap, written by Steve Emily, a local writer. And we had Mother Courage and all of her children, so that we could actually play a classic on our stage, a modern classic. Last year, Brigitte Dupree did a one-woman show called Stealing Sugar, which is a style that we work in a lot at the Millabo, which is original theater, usually performed by the playwright, the writer. So we have shows coming in from all over the country and internationally, where the performer is also the creator of the piece. We were in the midst of The Notorious Nugget, which is a musical that was written by Mark and Lauren Arnest, also local writers. And that's where we were when COVID-19 hit. And I was just thinking that it's our 19th season now, and it's COVID-19. I'm just so glad it wasn't COVID-20, really, because we're going to go for the 20th anniversary next season.
Of course, no matter what it looks like. And as I'm hearing you all talk, I've worked with all three of you. I'm working with you on various projects at various times. I know you, and it's slightly odd to sort of be moderator and think a little bit on the outside. But I'm recognizing, hearing you talk about this breadth of different styles and different types of theater that these three organizations that you're speaking about now represent, and then thinking about Theatreworks that Caitlin would tell us has been the professional theater that's sort of in residence at the University of Colorado for 45 seasons, founded by Murray Ross, and of course doing all kinds of academic engagement with the Visual and Performing Arts Department at UCCS. Of course, famous for lots of cutting edge contemporary theater and classics, and doing Shakespeare out at Rockledge Ranch, and promoting education. And I know that Theatreworks has some very exciting projects that are happening right now too. And then we think about the Fine Arts Center, and that the Fine Arts Center as an institution really started 100 years ago, right? 101 years ago now, in 1919. And it makes me realize that Colorado Springs, the theatrical universe here, is much bigger and much more welcoming than the outsider might think. And can anyone talk about that? About what does the theater community here really mean to you? And where do you see Colorado Springs' place in relation to the rest of the American theater?
I'll jump in on that, since I'm going to make something up anyway. Might as well do it right now. I've been pretty involved in Colorado Springs theater since the early 90s, theater community. And over that time, I've seen it change and grow in such a great way. I think that it is the potential to be a real live theater mecca. We have not only local producers and writers and actors that are really great, but it's also a place that people love to come to. So we hear this over and over again from our touring artists that, oh gosh, we came here from New York, we came here from LA, wherever, and this feels like home. We're so jealous that you have this space here.
Mm-hmm. Great. Matt, Jonathan?
Well, I'll definitely speak a little bit on how I've kind of seen things evolve, and it's been really interesting as a performer and as a subsequently as a producer. As a performer, I feel like there are just a lot more opportunities in general for actors of color, and just far more variety. On Facebook recently, I have seen someone that is fairly critical of the art scene give a specific shout out to the Fine Arts Center for doing Of Spacious Skies and having that story about the Conejos community. And that was huge, just producing Anna in the Tropics as well. So I've seen a lot of change, and I've seen a lot of content that is really shifted towards the general population. Springs ensembles, white is another good example of that. And so I've really seen an effort in the general community to tell stories that aren't typically included, which is very refreshing. And so as a producer, it's really nice to be able to create theater and just include as many people as possible in telling these stories, because at the end of the day, when you tell that story with the same amount of heart as the person that wrote it, you're really getting to the crux of what it is to have created that. So I think our community in general is really more conscious of the work that they're doing, and more conscious of the intent that they are producing with.
Yeah, that's great. I completely agree. Matt, anything else to add there?
Yeah, I would just add that I think Colorado Springs is a interesting community for theater because of all of the opportunities we have. A lot of other communities, it's either a professional company that has, resident actors that you just have no chance of ever performing in, or it's that just traditional community theater where it's the same, 80-year-old people who have been performing together since 1978. And here in Colorado Springs, we run the whole gamut of opportunity. We have small organizations, big organizations, professional, pseudo-professional. I mean, we have all of it. That's a really great place to be.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, so then March 13th happens. It's like for me, the day that will always be etched. And we make the decision, at least at the Fine Arts Center, that we need to suspend all activities because of COVID-19. And I know that whether your organizations were in the process of actually in performance or you were getting ready to, I mean, we were all in the same boat. But every single one of us, and so many others, I mean, there's 50, 60 theater companies in the region. Let's be clear. This is just a tiny little small set, but so many of us use the words of the title of this conversation, the key of making improvisational theater happen. Yes, and not a single one of us said, no, forget it, done. Everybody stepped up to the plate as early as March 14th at 12:01 in the morning and started to really make plans about what can we do and what do we need to change, and what were those things for you? What were the first things that became light bulbs for you at the beginning of this period of pandemic that we find ourselves still working through?
Well, I think that really the shock of having to shut down a show and the realization that we were not going to be able to do live performance, we were not going to be able to gather audiences in our space. And at the time, I think we were figuring a couple months, possibly midsummer, things like that. But that quickly was changed as we realized, this is for the long haul. Yeah. There's a horrible shift that happens, at least personally. I can only speak for myself and some of the actors that I've worked with. There's a horrible shift that happens when you realize you will not be able to perform live for a live audience in your venue, in your space, in your show that you've been working on. And instead, you're going to have to shift gears and go to a virtual tape recorded, videoed, Zoomed production if you want to reach your audience at all. And I think a lot of us, I know myself initially thought, how will we just stay in touch? It was not so much an artistic consideration as it was, how can we just remain barely relevant, not doing live theater? Mm-hmm. And that was a tough one because, there's a reason we do live theater and not television or movies. There's a reason we made those career choices way back when. So it's been a huge shift.
I've been saying that a lot, that idea about, well, I'm not sure that in this format, no matter what it is it theater? Is it the same experience? And, you know, I mean, here we are, we're having a live conversation, we're talking to each other, but we're not in the same space, and we're not engaging in the way I think that as theater artists we would prefer to. But that, Jim, I hear you, and that being that first feeling, but I know that the Millabo has been quite successful at doing a lot of projects in the interim, and maybe talk about how you were able to change what summer camps look like, or what stream performances do you think have worked, and has anything that you've done changed because of the medium that you find yourself having to work in now?
Absolutely, and I think that's true for all of us. Is, you know, you adjust and you figure it out, and then you go for it. I think that we arrived at the video or recorded solution by saying, look, you know, we're not gonna videotape our plays and put them up there. We don't have the production ability to do that. So instead, we're going to create brand new things which didn't exist before. And they're created strictly for video. They're created for social media. And we started putting those out right away. In March, we started making them and putting them up. And to date, I think we've done over 50 of them between the Girl Sprouts and Babette's Kitchen and some of the others. So there's been, and they're all very short, but you know, they've had over 100,000 views. So, you know, you're at least staying in touch with your audience. You know, they've garnered us about $7, maybe, you know, but at least people know we're still here. And then in terms of education, and this has been our biggest shift, and then I'll shut up for a bit, but, you know, we've really decided that what is missing is experiential education. And so just as soon as we deemed it safe and the health department deemed it safe, we started having small classes in person, students in masks. The summer camps went down to 10 students per camp, and it was mostly outside, very social distanced, and we had very good luck with them. So we didn't have any weirdnesses, and it worked.
I love to hear that, I mean, it's a factoid, but over 100,000 views of new content that you have created in a period of 6 months. That's huge.
If we only got $1 a piece for them, I mean, well, you know, right. Figure that out.
So the financial ramifications of all of this, of course, are a whole other hour conversation to have. I want to take a moment to celebrate that success. That feels like a success to me, Jim. So congrats to you.
Thank
you.
To
Brigida.
Yeah.
Matt, Jonathan, tell us about what your organizations started doing once March 13th hit.
Absolutely. I remember on March 11th and hearing all of these things going on and being super successful in ticketing sales with Puerto Rican Nocturne. I remember specifically saying the phrase was like, I don't care if an alien mothership comes down and like destroys the venue, we are going to make this happen. And then an order happened where they're like, no, you can't. And I went, okay, all right. Well, the powers that be made it so. So it was just out of that abundance of caution. And something that really has shifted is our thinking of who we are just as artists in general. So the projects that I've taken on in the last few months, I would have never really put it in my own cards from March onwards. On March 12th, I knew that I was going to open a show. I knew that I was going to be working at the Millabo after that, and I knew that I was going to be producing a series of shorts in the summer. By March 14th, I had lost everything that created my identity as an artist, and I went into a very dark area in terms of not knowing what I was going to do next. And then a lot of opportunities in terms of writing presented themselves. So in terms of theater to art, we've shifted two things. One is our mindset of original work creation, and my wife and I have been just writing consistently since March has happened to create some shows. But also we have rethought our structures of what theater can look like outside of a theatrical space, or what is considered traditionally a theatrical space. And that is influenced largely by Luis Valdez, who during the Great Strikes was with Cesar Chavez. He was performing theater on the back of a pickup truck, and people were lining up to see it, and it grew into a movement. So outdoor theater really resonated with me, and we had the opportunity to do an outdoor show again recently, and I've just been experimenting with and they're wildly successful. The demand is through the roof, and so my workings have been, how can I create a show outdoors within the guidelines outlined by the El Paso County CDC and Health Department, of how can we tell a narrative with people moving through open space and just adding that extra level of tactile experience to the theatrical experience on top of the story. So Theater Art, to sum up the point, is currently experimenting with theatrical structure, and is in the background creating content and forming relationships, so that as soon as we come out of the gate, we are really able to come out full force.
Yeah, that's great. So wonderfully inventive, and getting into I don't know, maybe a certain style that the company hasn't explored before. I think that's wonderful. And Matt, tell us about Set's 6-month journey over the last.
Yes. So immediately, we had just closed our first show of the season, Strangers on a Train. That one was one of our most successful shows we'd ever done. So we're, of course, high on those coattails of like, yes, it's happening. We're coming together. 11 years of work is really, really coming together. And, COVID hits. We had just cast White. We were getting started with rehearsals and getting that production shift moving. And, the stay-at-home order gets put in place. And that question immediately, particularly for an organization like Set, of course, all of us as well, but Set being an all-volunteer organization, immediately we're like, okay, what does this mean for the health and safety of our guest artists? What does this mean for the health and safety of our members? And including, not just artistically, personally, lots of people in our company lost work. Artists all around the city were out of work and out of ways to make money. So we set up a food pantry right away to make sure that if any artist in Colorado Springs is experiencing food insecurity, that we have a path to at least try and help alleviate that a little bit. That food pantry is still open for anyone who needs it. And then moving on from there, it was, okay, let's take a breather and kind of see where the chips fall. It's way too early, right, in March, to figure out what to do about a production cycle that we have, that we're planning. So, took a little bit of a breather, regrouped, and decided, okay, well, let's work with dramatists and see what they'll allow us to do. And in the meantime, we'll do virtual rehearsals, just loosely as we kind of figure out what's going on. So extended the runway of that production cycle to, make the time element not as stressful as it would be in a normal production cycle. So then we get that groove going, and the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor open up all of the civil unrest in the United States. And here we are, a small theater company that's doing a show about white privilege. It's doing a show about race in the arts. And, immediately the story becomes that much more poignant to us and much more important to tell, and to tell with reverence. So we kept going. And one of the things you asked about, Scott, was what was one of the inspirations. And for us, it was Toyota, of all places. Their production line, as cars are coming out or as pieces are coming out on a production line, if someone notices something that's unsafe, they have a a handle that anyone can pull to stop the production line so that everyone can regroup back together, talk about what the safety issue is or what the quality issue is, solve that problem, and then keep going. So we implemented that as part of the production cycle as well. In particular, as we got to the point where we were allowed to do in-person rehearsals in accordance with El Paso County Public Health and the state of Colorado. We wanted to make sure that everyone in that space felt safe, because it's the thing about art is it's always a risk. Every time you do it, you're taking a risk. You're making a risk. The nature of COVID too. That's where kind of those arguments that we see play out on Facebook all the time are centered around how much risk are we willing to take versus the danger, and that is such a balancing act that had me on pins and needles for months, worried about, is what we're doing the right thing to do? And then, by the time August rolled around, we were ready to film it, and we filmed it, cut it together as a piece, and released that at the end of September, and then closed it October 11th. So overall, we feel very successful with what we did because in comparison to some of the other things we're talking about, this is scripted entertainment, which is more akin to what we're used to doing. I mean, we already talked about the diversity of the types of theater we do, but this is, more of kind of a traditional way of doing it. So that was an interesting experiment in that way. And, here we are today. We're going to do it again for Hyde. And for Hyde, we're doing it a bit differently because now we're going back into a cycle where it's likely going to be less safe to be in person with each other than it was, in June and July when we were rehearsing white in person. So that's a whole different type of cycle that we're doing, the show we're doing. So
I find all of that wonderfully inspiring from all three of you. And I was just, as you were talking, I happened to notice that over on the Cultural Office's Facebook channel, which is one of the places you can see this, I see that our missing panelist, Caitlin Lowans, is chilling out over there because she's able to access that. So perhaps Caitlin will put in the Facebook chat some of the things that Theatreworks has been up to. For us at the Fine Arts Center Theater, we were in the middle of performances of The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, a 1-hour children's show. And on March 12th, which was a Tuesday, that was the first rehearsal for Silent Sky, a play by Lauren Gunderson that was going to be the next production on our main stage. And the next day, we shut it down. And so just thinking about not only the performers that were playing to sold out elementary school audiences and having to suspend that, but then having this wonderful first rehearsal for the next show and coming in on the second day and having to disband the company was terribly hard. And I think the Fine Arts Center as an entire organization has done some wonderfully inventive things. And I think under the leadership of our new executive director, Idris Goodwin, we're seeing a different kind of commitment to different ways to tell stories. And I think that the digital medium is one of the ways that we can do that, whether it's performing or visual arts, and all of those opportunities are available to check out at the Fine Arts Center website. But I don't want to make this about me or the Fine Arts Center. It's about the entire community. So here we are, and I'm looking at the news, and we are also at the Fine Arts Center. We're working very hard with the Actors Union, Actors Equity, as I know Theatreworks is doing as well, to try and get more permissions from the union to do more things, whether it's streaming or in person. But I look at the news, and it looks like Colorado had the most number of cases reported today than any day yet. And so what's your gut telling you? Are we going to continue to be inventive in this two-dimensional or non-traditional theater space for longer than you initially thought? Or do you think that even if we find that COVID does retreat or ends, or the vaccine does come and we are able to gather again, how much of what you're doing now do you think will transcend into the next 2 to 3 years?
I'd love to jump in on that, just because I think that we have found a really nice structure that people are responding very well to in terms of a promenade style theater experience. Theater to Art did Paradise Lost a few years ago, and that was when I was really starting to work with the company more, and it just blew me away. It was a promenade style sort of thing. It was indoors, pre-COVID and all that, but the idea that the audience is willing to engage with you through a story and go from point A to point B to point C is really awesome. And the ghost tours over the last couple of years really kind of cater to that experience. People love going from doing things outdoors, letting the ambiance of the surroundings kind of take them in, and it's definitely something that I think we can adopt and push moving forward. Primarily because Theater to Art is also a company that is always in search of a space, and if something is set outdoors, there's no better setting than the great outdoors. So. Caitlin in the comments mentioned Teatro Campesino, and that's exactly the sort of influence that I'm having with Theater to Art. Luis Valdez with Zoot Suit is just the idea that you can, and I've seen performances of Teatro Campesino outdoors, and it is absolutely mind blowing. Their focus is on their focus is on the actors, the costumes, and just incredible makeup effects, and they really just let the naturalness of the environment take over. So as a general structure, I've been really digging on Luis Valdez, hint for things to come, just because I absolutely love the idea that you can make something, someone can just turn around a corner in their everyday life and just blossom into the world of theater without having to go into what is considered a theater space.
Yeah, and you did the right incantation there, Jonathan. As soon as you started talking about Caitlin, she made it to us. Hi. Oh, you just muted yourself again, though, Caitlin. There
Hi,
you are.
y'all.
Hi.
Hello.
Bring us up to speed for everything you've missed. What do you want to express that you weren't able to give voice to yet, Caitlin?
Oh, goodness. Thanks. You're so patient as I'm here in the Theatreworks UCCS scene shop. What do I want to give voice to? I mean, I'm really excited. I mean, I'm perfectly delighted to jump in on this great question that you were asking, Scott, about like what of the now do we hope to carry forward into the next?
Yeah.
For me, a bunch of it is about process. You know, early in the pandemic, when it looked like we might be doing plays still over the summer, we had some of our auditions over Zoom, and the amount of sort of generosity and humanity that actors and directors were able to bring to those Zoom auditions, the starring roles by children and pets, I think broke down some of the hierarchy that can be part of an audition process. And so I'm excited about virtual auditions, opening access up to folks, making it so that people don't have to take as much time from their day from paying jobs to attend auditions. I'm excited about that part. And then I've been really delighted by, in the project that we're working on now, House Arrest, the play by Anna Devere Smith, with the monologues that we've been putting together for that. I've been delighted by, for example, because of Zoom fatigue, we had 16 actors paired with 8 directors, and that sort of like epic scope, not only in actors, but also in directors. I'm interested in how to bring that number of creative collaborative voices onto a process, even when we return to physical space. So like those are 2 of the process oriented ways that I'm excited to learn from now once we enter the next times.
Yeah, that's all wonderful. I can hear the excitement in your voice there, thinking about some of those dreams of the future. And not for nothing, let's just take a moment to note that Caitlin is enjoying actually being in part of the space of her organization right now. Yeah, why not show us wood and trash can? I mean, it's like I I mean, I get to stop by the Fine Arts Center Scene Shop once in a while, but I do miss the smell.
Yeah, we are literally next door with undergrads filming for that companion piece
Yeah.
for House Arrest. So yeah, I feel like I've gotten to be a little bit of a director over the past couple weeks, and that's a gift.
And I don't know, maybe the rest of you have, but does anyone miss putting on makeup? Have you been putting on makeup? Theatrical makeup? No? Okay, great. We're going to leave that there. All right, moving on. Matt, Jim, thoughts?
I still put on my nose, and that's about it. Really, just the nose goes on so fast.
I miss putting on the Ben Nye Foundation on a nightly basis.
Yeah, and you know, when you do that for video, we've had a couple of video experiences where the actors came in much more heavily made up than they should have been because they were still in the stage mode and had to go back and readjust. So
for sure.
Yeah.
But Matt and Jim, that question about like, you know, what do you think might the next 12 to 18 months bring, and what have you learned in the last 6 months that could be useful tools for you moving forward?
Yeah, I'm thinking that it's not likely we're going to end up back the same exact way as we were before. You know, I think it's gonna be an evolution to that, and a lot of what we're doing is going to stay. And I think it's the best parts that are going to stay. For example, how much more accessible theater is to people who can't leave their house, or the hearing impaired who have a chance to slow things down. You know, same thing with people with cognitive disabilities. The other part of that is I think we're facing uncomfortable truths about the way that we have, you know, produced theater in the past, and that level of access as well. When we're talking about underrepresented populations and underrepresented persons performing, being part of production teams, and I think that's here to stay. I don't think that's going anywhere, and I don't think it should go anywhere. You know, I think that's the nature of what we do, and if there is a shining light that comes out of this, I think that key word is going to be access.
Mm-hmm. Good. And Jim?
You know, I have toyed with this question a lot because, you know, I hate to sugarcoat just how bad it is to lose out on the experience, both as an audience and as a performer of live theater. And I really don't think that what we're doing now is going to replace it. You know, it is at best a substitute. It is giving us some artistic license, some freedom to explore new things, perhaps things that we should have chosen when we were undergrads, but we didn't. You know, we decided to be live performers. But we're experiencing the other side. But I feel for Millabo and for the work that we're doing, this experience and really, I'm not optimistic that we're going to be back in person doing live shows inside for at least a year. Now, I really extended on out. And so I think the effect of it for Millabo is that it's going to radicalize us, you know, in terms of our service to the community, in terms of the programming that we do. I feel like we are going to be moving towards a much more powerful, radical agenda of plays, of new writing, of new material, of new performance. And that's going to be true for all of our audiences. So we'll see how that translates, but that's the feeling I have.
Yeah, I think I'm right about this, that all of us represent organizations that exist in the nonprofit world. Is that right? None of us are for-profit entities. And so I do want to make it very clear that that this is a financially hard time for all of us and for the entire arts system throughout the entire United States and elsewhere. And we can always and will always graciously accept any support that any individual wants to give to any of the many organizations. And I do want to give a shout out very early on in March, the B. Bradenberg Foundation and the Pikes Peak Community Foundation came together and created an artists recovery fund specifically for individual artists here in the Pikes Peak region. And there have been a number of funds like that have been set up. But as this continues to move on and get deeper and deeper in our ability to create earned and contributed revenue sources, the more unsolicited support we can get, that just helps to ensure that these 5 organizations and all the other wonderful performing arts organizations in the region stay here and are still here when we get to the other side. So I do want to end with a very hopeful, what I hope is a joyous question, at least to think about. And I hope you can give me, whether it's a short or a long answer. And I just say, okay, so what if it's over? Like, I mean, I recognize it's going to be a slow thing, but what if we take magic into the realm and one day it just, boom. What's the first thing that you would want to be able to give as an entertainment event, as a performance, as a production for your community, in your organization? What's in your head? What's the celebration?
Oh man, after I throw a giant barbecue and invite everybody over and just gorge on delicious food, make some pernil or something. The first thing I've really been toying with, and something that I'm really excited about, as I mentioned, some of these structures, is I love the idea of cross-disciplinary work. So the idea of telling a narrative interspliced with various disciplines. Think of it as like just a play mixed with just some general entertainment of other performances that can accentuate that piece. I've been mulling around and writing for different instances of having an 8-part piece where one part tells a narrative, another part is a performance, and then a narrative and a performance, and just bringing hordes of people through in this giant cycle to have their minds blown again and again and again every like 15 or 20 minutes or however long each cycle is. So I really just want to, my first thing would be just a complete celebration of the adaptability of theater and the heart of the survival of the artist. So my first major thing, once we're fully in the clear, would be to celebrate art with just a huge cacophony of variety and performance.
I love it. I can't wait to either see it or be a part of it. Matt?
Yeah, and set, I'm thinking it's not really set unless we're in the round. It's 9 million degrees, everyone's sweating, and you're drinking like cheap wine, and there's way too many actors on stage to see what's happening. Again, because our space is so tiny, I think one of our hallmarks has become like, we're like real close together, and we're all enjoying this moment together. So whatever it is, big cast, cheap wine, and unbearably hot. But bearable because it's hot when we're doing theater.
I love it. Jim?
That's great. Well, you know, what we've missed the most at Millabo really is our family audiences. And, you know, being able to see kids, parents, grandparents, all of those different age groups together enjoying a show. So I think, you know, our first move when we're allowed to gather again, when we have that freedom to inside, is we'll put together just a very wild circus that will embrace all those different ages and really show off not only the reason we do live performance and live theater, but also why it's so critical that the audience be sitting in seats and 3 feet away from it, so that you know, the performers can once again breathe on them and be breathed on by them. You know, so,
I love it. I see it. I see the rings twirling in my head as you say it. Caitlin?
Yeah, such a good, I feel like everyone on the call so far has like the joy covered. So I'm thinking about how one of the 2 plays that we were going to do before the pandemic was it was an Iliad an opening night, and that's going to come back. But the play that like is probably only going to come back in my dreams for a while is Sarah Roll's Passion Play. And that play is it's a play that commemorates an event where like literally the citizens of Obergammerau did the Passion Play every few years to thank their God for saving their village from the plague, right? And so there's something about the ritual of a play originally created to thank on behalf of all of us who are still here while remembering those of us who aren't. And that was also an event where we were literally going to break bread with the audience, like have bread that we shared that people could rip and tear and share with their neighbor. And that sort of closeness and doing that, but bringing it around to all of the libraries, like our Free for All program. I have never been so happy here in Colorado Springs as when we were crammed in the multi-purpose room of the Rockrimmon Library or the East Library, and it wasn't about a rarefied experience of a theater. It was about infusing art and meaning and new opportunities for meaning making into people's daily lives and having them see their library or their grocery store or their local park anew. And I think that when we all get back, I know I'm going to be craving to see the spaces that I've been seeing in one way these 7 months. I'm going to be craving a rebirth for those spaces and for my community. So that's my dream of dreams.
Fabulous. And for me, I could very easily say, we're going to do a big, flashy musical with 40 tap dances like that. But also, I mean, quite frankly, I'm just looking forward to the day that we can actually get into a circle again, hold hands, hug each other, wish each other well. Those traditions of the theater are things that I miss terribly. I want to thank each of you for your creativity in general, for your participation this evening, for your wildly inventive ideas, for your strong work over the last 7 months, for your friendship, for your camaraderie. That is something to say. I will say that not just on the local level, but I think that on both a regional, statewide, and national level, I think one of the silver linings of this period is that I find that people in different creative communities are finding ways to interact and connect in ways that we haven't before. And so I think locally, I'm very hopeful that means that we are a more unified artistic community when we come out on the other side. And I'm thrilled to be part of this community with the four of you. Thank you so much. Happy Arts Month. For those of you watching, please support all 5 of our organizations, plus all of the others that are part of the wonderful ecology here in Colorado Springs. And my thanks to the Cultural Office. And happy Arts Month. It's only halfway through Arts Month, so you still have a good 15 days to go have that first cultural new event with either family or friends, whether in person or virtually. Right, Jonathan?
I don't have to speak now, Scott. I think you've covered just about everything there is to be covered here at the end. But to echo you, thank you, all of you, for your time this evening. Caitlin, I'm so glad we were able to get you on here at the end here for a little bit, plus some Facebook comments, which were very great. And really just appreciate the time and the thoughtfulness that you guys have put into this conversation. I will transition here and say that the next community conversation will be writing strategies during times of crisis. That will be the first one in Poetry, Prose, and Comedy Week of Arts Month. That will be October 21st at 7 p.m. So we hope that you can join us for that. In the meantime, you can view information on all 8 of these community conversations, including rewatching the ones that have happened and planning for the ones that are yet to come. That's at artsoctober.com. And then, as Scott said, there's plenty of time still to have at least one new cultural experience, virtual or in person, with family or friends this October. So thanks again for watching. Have a good evening, everybody.